Make no mistake, the revised version of these tax cuts still widens the inequality gap. The top 20% of income earners will get 50% of the benefit of these tax cuts. The bottom 20% will get just 0.4%, not even a whole percent. Brad Banducci, the CEO of Woolworths, is on a tidy $11.7 million salary, one of the highest paid CEOs in the country. He's still taking home a $4,500 tax cut. He won't even notice the difference. $4,500 for everyone earning over $200,000 a year. That includes every politician here and every billionaire in Australia. A total of $84 billion for the top tier of earners that could instead be used for free dental care, building public homes, fully funding our schools so parents and teachers don't have to plug the gap. Things that would actually help all Australians. But no, of course, Brad Banducci deserves that $4,500 tax cut. Woolworths made almost $2 billion in profit last year despite record high prices and ripping off the farmers who supply them. And of course, they can also afford to pay their CEO over $10 million. Prices of essentials like cheese have doubled in some cases. They can get away with this because of Australia's entrenched supermarket duopoly, preventing new entries into the market, and Labor still chooses to give Brad Banducci a $4,500 tax cut. His counterpart, Rob Scott at Wesfarmers, which owns Coles, on a measly $8 million, is also, of course, getting a $4,500 tax cut. And the government has the nerve to call this cost of living relief. That's a joke. Who else is getting a $4,500 tax cut? Australia's top 3 billionaires raked in a jaw-dropping $1.5 million an hour over the past 3 years. That's $1.5 million an hour. We're in the worst cost of living crisis in decades. 3 people pocket 27 times more than the median annual Australian income every hour. 27 times more. Labor is allowing billionaires to amass wealth at a mind-boggling rate, $1.5 million richer every hour. Meanwhile, 1 in 8 Australians are struggling to put food on the table, pay their rent or afford to go to the doctor. Australia has 141 billionaires. Just 3 of them made a staggering combined total of over $65 billion since 2020. $65 billion. The University of Sydney reckons it costs just over $250,000 to build a single social housing dwelling. With $65 billion, we could provide nearly 260,000 homes, ending the wait list for social housing about 3 times over. What does the government do instead? Pat themselves on the back for their so-called progressive changes to the Stage 3 tax cuts, changes that overwhelmingly benefit the likes of Gina Rinehart and Clive Palmer. Over 50% of the benefits flow right back into their pockets. The Prime Minister is handing out favours to his corporate mates with money that should be benefiting everyday Australians. The Labor government has clearly washed its hands of everyday people to pander to the whims of their donors, like Santos. There are many destructive corporations stalking the halls of federal parliament here, but I think if you wanted to pick the epitome of evil corporation that controls our government, Santos would be right up there. Santos, who donated $111,000 to Labor and $59,000 to the LNP last year, who has donated almost $1.5 million to the major parties in the last decade. Santos, who has its personnel embedded in the major parties. Queensland Labor Senator Anthony Chisholm was a strategist for Santos until he was elected in 2016. Santos, also a regular lobbyist in Queensland Parliament and federal Parliament. Santos, who, despite being a climate-wrecking gas corporation, continues to have new gas mines approved. Tanya Plibersek approved a massive expansion of Santos gas wells in Queensland just last year. There's been a lot of talk about tax lately, rightly so, but frankly the biggest issue with tax in this country is companies like Santos ripping us off. In the financial year of 2021-22, Santos paid only $15,876 in tax. That's less tax than the average Australian worker. And what was Santos's income that year? $5.8 billion. Now, despite making billions each year over the last decade or so, Santos has paid hardly a cent in tax that whole time. Santos claims it's because they're not making a profit. I'm sorry, but I think Australians are too smart to buy that nonsense. Either you're lying or you're very bad at running your business. But perhaps the answer is simple. Santos seems to own the Labor Party. It owns the LNP, so it can do what it wants. It rips out our gas, ships it overseas, makes a killing for its wealthy shareholders. We all pay more for our gas bill. Global warming gets worse, Santos pays no tax, our schools, hospitals and public housing are all underfunded. What a rort. If the government were serious about tax reform, they'd also be looking at negative gearing and capital gains tax. Labor and the LNP have made it easier to buy your second home or your fifth home than your first. Investors do well. Everyday people get screwed. Basically how it works is this. Labor and the LNP have given huge tax incentives to people who are buying an investment property. This means more people want to buy houses and it massively drives up the price of housing for everyone. Everyday people buying their first home have to compete with increasingly wealthy investors, but they don't have the existing capital or the tax concessions to compete with them. What are these tax cuts that Labor and the LNP are handing to investors? The first is negative gearing. That means an investor can claim all of the expenses associated with an investment property. That includes interest payments, maintenance, insurance, body corporate fees, council rates, as tax deductions from their income. So particularly for those in the top tax bracket paying 45% on income over $180,000, this is actually a huge saving. Of course, first home buyers have to cop all of those expenses themselves. They don't get to claim them on their tax. This affects how much they can afford to borrow. So instead of this property being some family's first home, it actually becomes a tax write-off for a wealthy investor. Sounds bad, doesn't it? But the rort doesn't stop there. There's this thing called capital gains tax. It's what you pay when you make a profit from buying then selling an asset. Normally, you'd have to pay tax on this profit just like any other income. But most investors can claim the capital gains tax discount, which reduces CGT by a whopping 50%. That means you pay less tax on asset inflation than you do on wages. Absurd. First home buyers, of course, don't benefit from this. They haven't sold a home before. And as house prices rise because of these government tax breaks, buying houses just to sell to other investors with substantially discounted tax becomes a reason to buy in the first place. So instead of this property being some family's first home, it becomes a speculative commodity for a wealthy investor. Here's an idea. Instead of subsidising property investors and making it easy for them to outcompete first home buyers, put that money into affordable and public homes for people who need a place to live. It's truly astounding to hear so many Labor MPs talk about how these tax cut changes leave no one behind. The Prime Minister even said this in his speech to the Press Club. Apparently people who don't earn enough income to reach the tax-free threshold don't count. Of course, many of these people are doing it toughest right now, and they won't see a cent from these changes. Thank you.